Well, good afternoon and welcome to podcast number 2. On Friday, I recorded a podcast about the upcoming race, the JFK 50 miler that was to be run on Saturday. And I participated in that race, and I thought I would do another podcast here to do a recap and let you know how it went. So it's hard to know how to describe the JFK 50 and really any ultramarathon. It's really a great experience. Maybe I'll call it a rich experience because it's a lot of different things. If I said it was a fun race, that would be true, at least for some of the miles. If I said it was painful or miserable, that would also be true, because in every race like that, there are some miles where it's not so pleasant. But it's always worth it when you get to the finish line. I really think of an ultramarathon a lot like life. There's lots of ups and downs. I once heard somebody say that in life you can either choose your destination and accept the path, or you can choose the path and accept the destination. And an ultramarathon is a situation where you choose the destination and you accept the path. And even though that path might be painful at times, there might be ups and downs, the fact that you get to the destination makes it worth it. So on Friday, I had went over some goals I had for the race, and I wanted to just kind of go down through them and see how they went. First of all, I had a goal to finish the race, and I did do that. I had a goal to get some good footage with my 360 camera, and I did that as well. That means that I'll be releasing a race video sometime in the next few days once I get it all put together. So stay tuned to my channel so you don't miss that. Also, I mentioned that I wanted to enjoy the aid station food. They had lots of aid stations along the way, lots of different food. Last time I took a good bit of my own food, not knowing what to expect. And after seeing what they had, I decided this time I wouldn't take as much. I did take a bag of chips and some 3 packs of Cliff Blocks, which are chewables, kind of like gels, except they're more of a solid chewable form. The first several aid stations aren't very well stocked with food in the JFK, and that's probably because just lack of demand. A lot of runners are still feeling good. They're not really putting a lot of calories away right away because they probably had something before they started. And so the first few aid stations mainly just had water, maybe Gatorade, and maybe some chips or something like that. But then later on, they had a lot more. And I ate some hamburger sliders. I ate ham and cheese sandwiches. I ate, actually it was toasted cheese sandwiches. It may not have been any ham in there. I'm not sure. There were some cookies. There was red velvet cake. I did pass on that again. I just wasn't quite in the mood for that by the time I got to, I think that was at the aid station that was in the late 30s, maybe mile 38. I'm not sure. But I did enjoy food till probably mile 30. After that, my stomach got a little bit queasy. But what else was there? I guess there was some chicken broth. I drank a bit of that, drank some Coke near the end, or the second half of the race, I should say. It seems to, a little shot of caffeine seems to help you a little bit later in the race. And so that was all good. And then the other goal I had, which I talked about at some length last time, was to finish in under 10 hours. Last time I finished in 10 hours and 36 minutes, I believe, was my official time. And I made some mistakes, as I said in my last podcast, just some mistakes with pacing and some other things, plus an injury. And I thought taking those things away, I could probably finish in under 10 this time. And it turned out I didn't. I wasn't able to. I'm satisfied with the time I got because, frankly, I left it all out there. I did the best I could. I finished in 10 hours and 23 minutes, which was a personal best. It's hard to know how to pace yourself in the JFK, really. The issue is the first 15 miles are rugged, and so you're going to, if you're a mid-pack runner, really, regardless of what runner you are, you're going to spend more time, or you're going to run slower those first 15 miles. And so it's going to be less than your average pace, those first 15. And so after that, you have to make up. If you have a particular average pace you're aiming for, or goal time you're aiming for, you have to make up for that slower pace on the first part of the race by running faster in the, after you get on the flat on the C&O Canal starting at mile, 16 or something like that, 15 and a half. The problem is it's hard to know exactly how fast you have to go, what kind of pace you should set after you get to the C&O Canal. You dare not go out too fast, or you have the problem I did last time where I went out too fast and burned out and had to really slow down at the end. So you have to strike a balance, but it's hard to know how fast. And one of the reasons is that GPS can be really wonky when you get near cliffs or drop-offs, because I guess it can't make contact with the satellites. And so you just get bad readings. My watch, as I was zigzagging down the Weaverton Cliffs at mile 15 and a half, whatever it is, I was walking most of the time because it's hard to run down that. You just jog a little bit and then you have to kind of wait in line to get down around the switchbacks, and it's kind of treacherous. And my watch said I was going 8-minute miles, which was obviously not correct. I was probably going more like 15 minutes per mile. And so I knew my watch had given me extra distance. And sure enough, it had. I mean, it didn't match up with the place where the aid stations were supposed to be. I knew my watch had been generous to me. And so that meant that I couldn't really rely on the pace that my watch said I was going, like the average pace for the whole race. It was pretty accurate with, just looking at the lap pace, the mile I was in. It was valuable to help me understand how fast I was going currently, but it was not valuable for me to look back and say, okay, I averaged this much so far, I need to average, a certain pace from here on out to equal that out. So I was left to just look at the signs at the aid stations. Some of the aid stations had signs that said, mile whatever it was, 23.5 or whatever. I'm not sure if that was one of them, but that was helpful, but it required to do some math, and it's not necessarily easy math, and math tends to be hard to do when you've been running for a long time. So as it turns out, it was pretty hard for me to know how fast I really needed to go. I decided that probably 11-minute pace, 11 minutes per mile would be good enough. I tried to keep it between 10 and a half and 11-minute miles. At first that wasn't hard at all when I got to the C&O Canal towpath, but once I got into the 30s, it began to be difficult and became increasingly difficult to maintain that pace. As your muscles tighten up, your stride gets shorter, don't take as big as steps, and it really starts to get painful. It's hard. It's like mind over matter trying to maintain that pace. And plus, you're going to stop at aid stations. You might need to get something out of your pack from time to time. And all of those seconds that you stop add up, and that means you have to run faster to maintain an average pace. And you dare not neglect to stop long enough to get food, for example, because that will hurt you as well. So I stayed on that pace until, I'm going to say, I was in the upper 30s, maybe 35 to 37 miles into the race. It was kind of a low point. Things were getting real tough. My appetite was gone. I was having trouble putting food down. And I happened to catch up with a couple of guys, or maybe they caught up with me, that were trying to do some math. And I asked what they were trying to figure out. And they said, well, we're trying to figure out what pace we have to go to finish in under 10 hours. And they said, do you know? Can you help us? And I said, well, no, I was hoping you could help me. I didn't know. I mean, I had kind of an idea that 11-minute miles might be good enough, but I didn't know. And so they did some math, and they kind of came to the same conclusion. They said, if we can hit 11 every mile, we probably can make it. Turned out that wasn't quite good enough. I got to mile 42, and that's where you turn off the C&O Canal path and get on the road. And from there, it's about 8 miles on the pavement and some rolling hills to the finish line. And the first thing I noticed when I got onto the pavement is that the pain level went up, because the pavement is very hard once you've been on softer trail for a while. And not only that, there's rolling hills, and there's one, as soon as you turn on the road, you have to go up a long hill. And about halfway up that hill, I reached mile marker 8. So once you get to the road in the JFK 50, there are mile markers that count down the miles. So that's when you finally get clarity on what pace you need. And I got to that mile marker, so I knew I had 8 miles to go. So it was pretty simple math at that point. So to finish the race in 10 hours, I had to do 10-minute miles from there on out. And I immediately knew that it was going to be extremely difficult because I was having trouble keeping even 10.5 and 11 on the flat, and now I was in the hills on the pavement. But I was stubborn enough I wasn't going to give up quite yet, and so I tried. I went for 1.5 to 2 miles, trying my very best to keep my speed up without overdoing it and having to stop. And it simply was not possible. Physically, I was not able to get it done anymore. My stomach was not feeling well. I thought I was going to throw up. And it was clear that it wasn't going to happen. I think the most I mustered on those first couple miles, even with all that extra effort, was, 12, just because of the hills. And so at that point, I knew I wasn't going to get in under 10 hours. I knew it was beyond the realm of possibility. And I was okay with that. I mean, I knew that I'd done everything I could. I knew that I had left it all out there, and I just wasn't quite physically fit enough to get it done. And so I kind of reevaluated it at that point and said, well, there's no sense in killing myself over the last few miles. I knew what my time was the previous year, and I figured I'm just going to try to make sure I get a PR and get under 10.5. And that meant that I didn't have to push so hard. It was still painful, still a lot of suffering, but I could do, 13-minute miles, and it was no big deal. I was still going to make it in time. It allowed me to have a little bit of enjoyment those last few miles, struck up a couple conversations. It's actually kind of hard to do in those last 8 miles because not many people are in the talkative mood, really. Everybody's a little bit done with racing at that point. They're ready to stop, ready to get to the finish line, and there's a lot of them that just aren't really in the mood to have a conversation. But there were a few people that had some pleasant conversation with those last few miles, and the finish line it's really hard to explain what it feels like to cross the finish line of an ultra marathon, especially the JFK 50, with so many people out there cheering and yelling. All the noise, and an announcer typically calls out the names of most of the people who go across the finish line. And it was just a really good experience to cross the finish line. My family was there just before, about maybe 1/10 of a mile back from the finish line, there to cheer me on for the last little bit there. And so definitely a great experience. I'm satisfied with it. I know, time-wise, it wasn't what I wanted, but it's what I could do, and I didn't feel like I made any horrible mistakes with the pacing. I did what I could, and it fell a little short. So, I guess the other thing is I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who was involved: the other runners, the race directors, the volunteers, the emergency personnel, the people running the aid stations. It just all those put together make for an awesome event. And also the people cheering. I mean, there were some aid stations where you had walls of people on both sides, just a narrow path between two walls of people that were just screaming and shouting. And all that noise, all that cheering is a huge help when you're in the late stages of an ultra marathon and things are starting to fall apart. And believe me, those cheers definitely lift your spirits and keep you moving. So I'll be in recovery mode for a few days. I'm already starting to feel fairly good. Hope to ease back into running in the next week or two, and keep an eye out on my YouTube channel. Hopefully I'll get that video done from the footage I got during the race, and hopefully I'll have more podcasts for you in the future as well. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.